Roll, Vice Mayor,
Present.
Alderman Blanton, Alderman Hanson,
Here.
Alderman Peterson,
Here.
Alderman Berger,
Present.
Alderman Brown,
Present.
Alderman Potts,
Present.
and Alderman Baggett,
Present.
and the mayor is here too. So the next item on the agenda is an opportunity for citizens to make comments for items not on the agenda. I have one speaker that we're going to give 2 minutes. That's Paul Leibowitz. So Paul, come on up.
Thank you, I'm Paul Leibowitz. I live at 102 Winslow Road. I spoke to you, our leaders, at one of your last work sessions, and here I am again regarding the Middle Eight. I trust you have your ears and minds open to citizen comments. There are a group of citizens surrounding the Middle Eight property, and we've mobilized our efforts to not block the Middle Eight, but to ensure Middle Eight is no taller than Jameson Station, which is 3 floors and a penthouse. And the Middle Eight definitely should not be taller than the landmark factory water tower and should be more on the scale of the factory. The 4, 5, or 6-story proposed Middle Eight building simply pushes the available site envelope and flies in the face of the standards and ambiance of our central Franklin overlay district established by planning. Since I appeared here, the citizens group has gathered about 158 signatures around the site and another 1,000 from other residents requesting the Middle Eight buildings be limited to 3 floors and a penthouse like Jameson Station. Citizens from Miles Manor, Lancaster Drive, Old Liberty Pike, Daniels Drive, Jameson Station are not in favor of the tall proposed Middle Eight building with less than the required number of parking spaces. You can plan from City Hall, but the real world is us living in the shadow of the Middle Eight site. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did I get 2 minutes?
How close did he get?
I didn't. I didn't time it myself.
You'll have to practice more, Paul.
Try again.
Less than 2. You were definitely less than 2.
You were less than 2. Okay, we're going to start the work session, item 1, which is discussion of alternative site analysis for the new City Hall.
So this is a follow-up to the discussion we had last work session. We have some additional information we'll share with you, but we got the sense that you all wanted some more time to discuss, give direction, ask us other questions. Our hope is to carve out at least the first hour of our meeting time today, if we need it, to that discussion. If there's a sense that we need a follow-up meeting or even a special work session, we're glad to accommodate that as well. But we thought this is a good starting space, give ourselves some time here. So our team did pull together a little bit of additional information along with what we presented to you 2 weeks ago. I think we may share that with you as a little bit of an update, but really this is your time for discussion and any other information you'd like from our team, and we'll take it from there. So Vernon, I'm not sure who's going to start us off, so.
Thank you, Eric. Good evening, Mayor and Alderman. What we'd like to do to set the stage for the discussion is perhaps just give a quick review of where we were 2 weeks ago. We have all the information then, and even as Eric mentioned, some additional information. But I'll start with talking about the potential scenarios that we shared with you. We have the cost sheet that we can bring back up, and we know that'll be a point of discussion. But for additional information, we also looked a little bit more critically at the H.G. Hills property that's been a point of discussion. So we're going to share a little bit of information with you on that, and then also want to share with you some of the conversations that we've had with the county assessor. The appraisals that we've received for this property have gotten attention because they may not reflect the value that we think it's worth, which most property owners in the city sometimes come to the same conclusion. But we did obtain 2 appraisals from certified appraisers, and we've also talked to the county assessor. So with that, and this won't take too long.
He's coming.
He's
It's
coming.
blinking. It's not actually ready to go.
All right.
It's going to help you out there for a second.
I'll go ahead while they're working on it. Talking about the potential scenarios is that that we have scenario one is the existing site in the current proposal with subgrade parking that nets out about 130 spaces. Scenario two is same proposal, but consideration of not having the subsurface parking. Scenario three was looking at an alternative site, perhaps a smaller site that would allow for a structured parking facility to be built. And then the fourth scenario would be an alternative site that would allow surface parking. And to accommodate approximately 300 spaces, we come up to about 100 spaces per acre of land, and give or take a little bit. So we would need 3 additional acres. So with that, we'll go on to the,
Can I make a comment about that? Because whenever I was asking about that, I've noticed that in many of the places, there are angled parking. In other words, it's not that you have the 24-foot drive and then everybody parks at a 90-degree angle. And so I think that those with the smaller, drive aisle and the angle parking probably would put more into it, because looking online, I found that they said, it could be 200 per acre.
well, we can certainly look at that depending on the site. If we look at alternative sites, we can be more critically look at how the site could be laid out. So,
You do,
Talking about surface parking, yeah.
we do have specific design standards related to parking lots and how those work. We'd want to factor that into this as well. So that might affect
But
what
don't-
you're able to do with that.
But don't we have a lot of parking now with, especially in commercial areas, but not just that have the angled parking instead of having the really.
Certainly those exist, but you just have certain standards already established for parking lots, and we'd want to look at how that
Okay,
relates.
yes.
That's all I'm saying.
We probably
Yeah.
need to, and I think they're not all with the 24-foot.
Yeah, and you've
drive
got
aisle.
some landscaping requirements and some other things that would also be involved in using space.
all right, so then we'll come back to this. This is the cost comparison that we talked about and the implications of that. Then want to take a moment to go to the H.G. Hill site.
Go to the last slide.
Keep going.
Okay. This one?
That one right there. We talked about, looking at this site on multiple meetings, and the site's about 1.69 acres. And the
5.69.
Williamson.
5.69.
5.69?
Yeah. Yes.
5.6, what did I say?
You said
One.
1.69.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You weren't a math major, were you?
I'm sorry. And then the Williamson County Assessor's Office land value for it is about 3.7. I love 3.7 million for it. And we had talked about when we look at any site, alternative site, and including this site, that there may be other cost implications for off-site improvements. And please note that we didn't dig deep into this, but there's likely improvements that whether we develop it or somebody else that are going to need to be considered. And they range for East Folk Street, West Folk Street, Acton Street, on-site sidewalks, stormwater, and sewer and water infrastructure. We have some of that on this site that totals a little bit more than 800,000 along 3rd Avenue, but we also have infrastructure on Church Street that's going to be part of that sewer extension project. So, it's hard to say, but the on-site and off-site improvements could equate to over $3, maybe even to $5 million. But we don't know that until we get into doing some more due diligence on the property. And then I'm going to turn it over to Kelly a little bit because she's spent a fair amount of time as we talked to the county assessor. We've looked at other properties in and around the square, how they look at assessing property, and we've talked about it, and I'm hopeful that the information she shares will be insightful, and it's not an exact science, as we see with even the certified appraisers.
Thank you, Vernon. Can you all hear me okay? All right. We've had a couple conversations with the property assessor's office, both Brad Coleman and David Horner, who heads up the commercial appraisals in Franklin. And appraisals are determined by 3 different approaches. One is by cost of construction, and mostly it's used for new construction. By sales prices that look at comparable sales in the area, and by an income approach that looks at the revenue that can be generated for commercial properties. Downtown Franklin, of course, is very unique and very complicated. So the assessor's office uses the sales approach on the majority of commercial properties. They use the sales approach because it captures the income approach, because the buyer purchases the property based on how much income can be generated from leasing the space for commercial use. So many of the lots along Main Street are very, very tiny. Some are 0.03 acre. And many of the buildings cover almost the entire lot. That means that the income is almost the entire acreage of those properties. And when the building fills up the entire lot, which many of them do, almost every square foot is leasable. So it's revenue generating. So you get really high values when you start doing the math on that. When you consider the value of larger sites with redevelopment potential, it's not likely that the entire site is leasable for income generating space. There's parking lots or parking structures, there's open space, there's walkways. None of those contribute to the income that's generated. The building square footage does that. And an example that's probably the closest to the public square is Harpeth Square. It's a larger site that's had redevelopment on it. The assessor's office values that land under Harpeth Square, not including the landmark site, at $8.1 million on 4.4 acres. However, based on the income approach, the value of the parking garage is actually 0, because the parking garage alone doesn't contribute to the leasable space. It supports the commercial, the apartments, the hotel. And when you look at the average of that land across the 4.4 acres, it's about 1.8 million per acre that the assessor's office values the land there. So trying to look at small sites versus large sites is really challenging because it's not a direct apples to apples comparison. Really, no property is an apples to apples comparison, especially when it comes to downtown, because there are so many factors that go into the valuation of a property. And part of that is what the buyer ultimately wishes to do on that property, what their use is, and how they are going to lease the land for commercial purposes.
Well, thank you, Kelly. We'll pull up the cost comparison sheet and open it up for questions, and we're here to respond as best as we're able. If not, we'll definitely come back with answers.
Go ahead,
Thank
Vice
you.
Mayor.
Well, let's go back to the first screen, I think it was, not the first, let's see about the second, where we're looking at the number of parking spaces. And we've always talked about the underground garage here being 210. But now we've gotten to the point where we're including the garage over there in with the 210. It's already built. I mean, I can't see the reason to include that in with this right here, because what it does, it actually, if I can find that again, it actually, a net gain of 130 spaces, but that's not what we have. what you have is, if you do the 210, just on the space that the city hall is on, you don't have 210 gain, you have 50 or 60 spaces lost. And that's what we've always discussed. But now we come out and we've got 130 gain because we've included the parking lot over here in with that scenario. I don't exactly understand why we did that.
I think what you're really doing is you're comparing the 200 and some spaces that would be under the city hall at this
Underground.
site, less the surface parking that you're losing.
Right.
The total is there because you already have parking on site, but the real number to look at is that net 130, and that's the comparison of additional structured parking that you would build, less the surface parking you would lose on the Church Street end of this property. So I think that's what that reflects.
Okay.
And to add on to that, we've always internally included the parking garage spaces in the overall site of what parking is being provided, because some of the parking in the existing structure is needed to meet the requirement for parking for a civic institutional use like City Hall. So that's the difference between the two. If we go to another site, we need to build or construct the full 300 spaces, not just what we're adding under the building for the public square site.
And I think a kind of a fair way to look at it might be in option one, you're spending net around $100 million or $10 million to achieve a net addition of 130 spaces, just by the nature of what you're losing, what you're adding, and the relative cost of building and structure that supports a 3-story building above it, which makes it more expensive parking to build. What we have done with this project previously is sort of looked at blending the City Hall project with another approved CIP project, which was additional downtown parking. You know, option 2 sort of decouples that, but option 1 keeps that in. And I think a fair way to think of it is there's a net swing of about $10 million in cost for a net increase of 130 spaces at this site in option 1.
Is there any ability on the existing parking deck for expansion, or do you know if there's any plausible way that in the future, I'm not talking about along with this project, but should the city decide in the future to add spaces or expand it, is that physically possible? Is it physically possible?
With time and money, you can do anything.
Right.
You just can't move a building with the doors in this direction.
That's right.
Okay.
You've got what? It's 20 plus years old. You'd have to look at probably a read.
It's a precast structure.
Yeah.
Precast structures are economical in the fact that they're not designed for additional loads. They're designed for exactly what they're receiving right now. So could you theoretically somewhere, you have to reinforce a lot of existing members. And the layout is not set up for that. It's unlikely, but again,
Given the age, you'd probably be better to start over and look at a reconfiguration. And if you could add land to that footprint or that parking footprint, that might be your option to more economically add more spaces. We do have different standards today than we had when that was built. We would need to wrap the parking garage. You'd provide some activity on the first floor. So it would be a different structure than what you see today. Kelly, I don't know if I said that all right. Those are city administrators' quick version of what a planner would say.
So how many parking, I'm going to get still on that. How many parking places are in the 2nd Avenue garage that has already been built, been there for 20 years?
Like 304, something like that.
304?
Something like that, yeah. Something like that.
$299.
Okay.
299, okay.
Our current.
Yeah, the garage is $299 current.
If we exclude the trucks, it'd be 0.
Yeah, maybe that's what I was thinking.
Well,
Go ahead, Alderman Peterson.
how many people that work in City Hall park out there? Or how many people do we have working at City Hall now?
Yeah, we have that number.
Well, we have close to 215 thereabouts, but I would rather hone in on your
No,
first.
I'm just asking.
how many park in here, park on the site would be the 60 or so spaces that we have around the building, as well as in the parking structure. However, we've recently started having employees take advantage of the take-home vehicle policy, in which a lot of the city vehicles were parked on the top level of the parking structure. So thereby, we reduce the parking impact by those employees not bringing their car and parking it in a space and then taking the city vehicle. So more employees are taking advantage of that policy to take their city vehicle to and from the office, which helps frees up space in and around City Hall.
Okay, so how many spaces are specifically for city vehicles? And that would be in addition to, just number-wise, in addition to the people, the 215 that work on the site. So right now, how many of those 299 spaces are completely set for city vehicles?
I'm gonna give you an estimate, because since we recently instituted that take-home policy, we've been monitoring the vehicle parking, because if we can free up more spaces for the general public, we want to do that. So there's probably about 35 spaces reserved for city vehicles, and now somewhere's almost to 18 are taking vehicles home. So we're going to free up most of those spaces here in the very near future.
A lot of those are inspection staff, so it enables them also to go directly to a work site. So it's really an efficiency, both around the parking spaces like Vernon described, but also in terms of work productivity. They can go right to a site and do work right away, as opposed to having to come in, get in a car, go out. So it does help us with that option, at least.
So,
And while we're talking about parking spaces, what about the 4th Avenue garage?
Well, it's a slightly larger garage. It's around the same size, but it's slightly larger.
About 350 spaces.
Okay.
And we don't have any city reserved vehicles in that at all. There is some short-term parking on the first level,
Right.
and then the balance is really general public parking.
And when was it built compared to this one? I started trying to think about that, and I didn't have any idea.
Right around the same time, but
The 4th Avenue garage was built a little bit later, around 2004, 2003. And the 2nd Avenue one was before that. I'm not sure the date.
can we tell me what the take-home policy is? In other words, what I'm asking is, do we limit the amount of miles that we can drive? Do we have somebody that's taking one home and they live in Hohenwald and they drive to work? What is the take-home policy? Because what you've actually done when you did this to simplify the number of parking places you've got, you've actually increased your cost as far as take-home vehicles are concerned, because you're putting that much more miles and wear and tear on. I just want to know, would like to know.
yeah, I think it's about a 35-mile radius, if I remember right. So it used to be within the county, and then we changed it to a mile radius because that made a little more sense, because you could live in the county and actually be farther away. And I think that's our general guideline.
So it's 35
Yeah.
miles radius.
Yeah. Now, we have the ability to grant an exception if that comes to us, but that's the general guideline. So, if I have somebody who says, well, I live 40 miles away, can I get it? The city administrator has the ability to grant an exception beyond that, but that's the general guideline.
So
If
who pays for the gas?
We do.
Yeah, as long as
We're talking kind of about auto policies.
No, we're not talking auto policy.
Well, we're talking
If
about-
you'll sit and listen for a few minutes, I'll tie all this together.
Yeah,
Okay. All right. The reason I say that is because when we do what we're doing, we're obviously taking away, and I just got through saying that, we're taking away and we're adding a cost to our fuel cost or some other avenue of being able to be charged for something. And I know we are constantly doing cars and vehicles and upgrades and uploading those. So we haven't really totally completely solved the problem as far as them being out of the garage, because they're gonna come in and park. When they get through one inspection, they gotta come back in, they gotta park, they gotta go for another inspection, they gotta come back in and go and park. My only, when I ask what I ask is, you know, and I travel a little bit every once in a while, and when I see a City of Franklin vehicle in Columbia, which is not 35 miles, by the way, you're covered there. And I'm just wondering how far somebody can take one of these city vehicles and go and use it, because it's basically to and from work. That's a personal use.
Yeah.
I understand where you're going, Vice Mayor, but I'd like for us to pull back and look at these scenarios. You know, I
That's it.
understand that you
That is a
think,
scenario, because that's based on the
I
parking
understand,
comments that we've got right
but we're
here.
trying to decide sites, and I'm afraid we're jumping down a hole. I'll let you go a little further if you want.
Well, I
But,
don't think
I'd
we're
like
jump-
for us to
I don't
really-
think we're jumping down the hole when we're relating this back to a net gain of 130 parking spaces.
May I
Go
try,
ahead.
attempt, not to say I'll be successful with it. You know, having the ability, and this is evolving. Our inspectors necessarily, when they take their vehicles home, don't come back to City Hall. They're able to obtain their inspections online and go right to sites. Do they stop in at some point during the day? Yes, they do, and check in and maybe some meetings. But the efficiency that we hope to realize will be having them wherever they're coming in can get right to a job site. Both for level of service, because generally contractors start earlier in the morning, and we can be more responsive instead of having the employees report to work, get information, and then go out to a site. This way they can go to the site, and that's really where that efficiency, we hope to see it come into play.
And just so you know, too, this isn't a blanket approval. If you're within 35 miles, you get it.
Right.
There's a business case made that this makes sense, that the workload fits, that it can be more efficient because you can go right to or from a work site as opposed to coming in, getting a car, going in and out. So it is something that is done trying to look at the whole of our operations, the needs of our customers, and trying to be as efficient as we can. We know there are costs associated with whatever we do, and we try to look at it and be as smart as we can with how we use those resources. Yes, the vehicle is one. Yes, the parking space is one. The time of the employee, the time with and serving and responding to a citizen or a customer is part of that as well.
Alderman Baggett?
I think I spoke with the property assessor too, and had a great conversation. I think I'm not going to sell the City Hall property for, anywhere near the appraised values, anywhere near, even remotely near the appraised values. It's not worth it to the citizenry to do that, to be honest. And the only way to really know what it's worth is to put it out there for sale. And then you'll see what it's worth. And I'm fearful of the length of time that will take, because the costs of inflation are real as well. And those are real dollars. So you start in this kind of guessing game of, well, just how much could we get out of our City Hall site, which I have no doubt it could be quite significant. And if I'm part of the selling body, I'm going to be a pretty unwilling seller. I mean, from a pricing standpoint, hard negotiator. We'll put it better. That's probably the better way to put it. We don't have to sell it. We're in it for a very little amount of money. We don't have to sell it, and so therefore we're going to sell it for as much as we can get, and then some, because this is there's not another piece of property like this in Middle Tennessee, really in the whole Southeast. I mean, you could argue in the country. I mean, this is America's favorite main street, and this is right on the corner of the square. I mean, you're right. Kelly said it. There's no science that exists, because it's never happened before. This kind of property opportunity. So that makes this difficult to weigh, which I think a lot of us were thinking, well, if we get a lot for this, then maybe we get City Hall at a discount because we sell and go to a different location. But that's becoming harder and harder, in my opinion, to do. Thank you for putting the time into the appraisals, although it didn't really give us the information I think we all wanted, which was what this would sell for. I've come to realize, I think, that only by putting this on the market would we know what it would go for, and I don't know that I'm ready to do, I'm willing to do that. And then the inflation prospects just really start to add up, and to a degree that is equal to or more than the appraised value of the property that we have from the actual professional appraisers. So to think about that, just the inflation cost of construction to wait exceeds the amount that a professional appraiser has told us our land is worth. Yeah, it's just a big gamble to try and to let that play out. The other thing, I'm with Alderman Barnhill on the parking. I've always had a little heartburn about just the additional 130 extra spaces, although that's better than we have today by 130 spaces. I'd be curious, the reality, we just saw the downtown parking study, and we've got problems, and this is not going to necessarily solve them. It's going to, we have downtown parking problems. Mm-hmm. And so, lumping in the downtown parking structure into this project might help the financials of this project, but it's certainly the 130 spaces are not going to solve our downtown parking problem. I know that Vernon says we don't have a downtown parking problem. We have a downtown free
downtown parking.
parking problem, and I know that's well received. But we do have our decks are full pretty much all the time during the day, and so I would even explore going. You're only going to dig up this site once, and I think we should exhaust the possibility of more parking underground if possible. They're doing it in other, and I would rely on engineering to determine that. But they're doing 5, 6, 7 stories underground right next to the river in Nashville. I know we have water, but there's also engineers who there are also engineers who get paid very well to figure these kinds of things out. As you said, anything can be done for money. So, yeah, I knew there'd be some that wouldn't like that.
No, I just wanted to
But I
say,
do-
yeah, I've heard about the one that parking garages in Nashville sometimes have to be, the water has to be pumped out of them. And this is somebody who should know about that, who made that comment.
Yeah, I would. Parking is so. The point is, parking is not to say I'm going to die on that hill for 2 floors under the city hall, but we need to explore every and all possibilities for additional parking in downtown, because I don't think this is enough net to solve any kind of problem. Those are my comments. I don't think that this is the last one. We've gone up by another $14 million, and I think I'd like to speak for myself that I still do not want to vote for any kind of city hall that would increase the property tax rate for citizens. That becomes very challenging with the inflation. But we need to really, that value engineering is coming. We have to, I believe that's just a level of fairness. I think for the citizens, we have roads and different things need to be done. And we can look at those separately, but I don't want this decision to affect the property tax rates of the citizens. And I think we can do it. I think we have enough built in here that we can do it. I think this is probably a conservative budget estimate at $99 million. Honestly, I think it's really conservative. And I think if we need to engage and I don't know what the different roles are on the team right now, but there are other municipalities and entities that employ owners reps, third-party checks on various things that are not involved in the project itself. I'd be certainly open to looking at having someone else to make sure that we're doing things right from a cost standpoint. It really shouldn't cost as much money. And I think as a board member, I would like to know that we've got enough people working collaboratively, but maybe even a third-party owner's rep that is working on our behalf to make sure that, and don't take this the wrong way, team. I know that the team is working on our behalf, but it's a model that's been done in other government municipality projects and here locally successfully as well. So I would be interested to know if that might be a possibility, so we can assure the citizens that we're doing our due diligence, because we're not going to dig into all the details of it, but that would help me.
Mayor?
Go ahead.
Please, thank you for your comments. And after each meeting we've talked to you, we go back and we really digest what we've heard from you. And I'd like to respond a little bit when you talk about the value of this site. One of the things that we've done is we've surveyed the DNA and DFA. And, you know, they've provided an indifferent view on whether it should be here or somewhere in their downtown. But the consistent message that they gave is what would be built here, like many of our other citizens. That the reason I bring that up, because that impacts any future potential of value for this property that would be scrutinized incredibly closely.
They would not want us to sell this for maximum amount of money and then get maximum amount of density out of it because of that. And I agree. I think the alternative is very negative if you do squeeze every red cent out of it.
Anybody else? I'm
Go
some other
ahead, you
people
go
if you don't
ahead.
mind.
I don't mind in the least.
Yeah, because I think we're trying to hear from everybody,
Okay.
Vice Mayor. Maybe they don't want to speak, so if they don't speak, I'm going to go ahead, Alderman Brown, and then I'll get Alderman Berger.
I just have a question on the parking. Is there anywhere else a site exists like the church? I know we've had conversations with them before about a structured garage. Is there an opportunity to take the parking out of the city hall? I realize it's not attached, but build a structured parking there for similar money over off of where the church is over here. What's that? This,
The Methodist Church on-
yeah, Fourth.
Fourth and
Right there?
Church.
Yeah. Is there an I'm not saying that one for sure. I'm just saying, is there an opportunity like there? Put in a structured parking, gain more spots for similar money, not have to worry about going down, digging, doing all that, dealing with the water. We get parking, we get more parking, we build our city hall. We still park in second, but we've just added a bunch of spots here. Is that a better scenario for us to use those funds and gain net more parking?
Yeah, that was, quite frankly, the assumption in the CIP when we did it 5 years ago, was that would be a separate project. We'd look for a site where we could build structured parking. I think we allocated about $10 million in the CIP for that purpose. You'd need to have the land and the opportunity or partnership to do that. In the past, that the site you've talked about has been talked about. We had previous arrangements behind the 4th Avenue Church of Christ with that surface lot. We looked at whether that could someday be some kind of structured parking. But again, you need a partnership, you need the access to the land, but you certainly could build a significantly higher number of parking spaces within that $10 million. Say if you went back to that, the idea of decoupling that and making it its own project, you're still going to have the need. And you'd have to look at how you find it and where it works and what location is the best location for it too, because where you put it matters too. If you put it in a place that's too inconvenient, you're not going to get the benefit. So we need something that is connected to the core of downtown that could be useful that way. But yeah, you could certainly deliver a significant more productive version of parking, structured parking that way. But we don't have a readily available site that, we could go tomorrow, but we'd have to work that.
I don't like the idea of spending the money either, but in 50 years, people will look at us and say, why the heck did they not build parking underneath this building if we don't do it? They just will, because this building won't be going anywhere for 100 years. It's kind of, I don't like the money either, but it's almost like, it's almost a no-brainer, in my opinion, but everyone else has water issues.
Were you done, Alderman Brown?
I am.
Okay, Alderman Berger.
We had at one time talked about, first of all, one of the parking issues is getting all the employees downtown, not maybe all of them, but close to a higher number of the employees downtown parking off-site. We talked about that at Bicentennial. And, we have an issue up there if we have flooding, but we talked about that, about trying to park off-site. And how many times, we can go for years and not have any real flooding there, or we can have a big rainstorm, we have some flooding. We know when those things are coming. We have the technology to basically know that if we're going to have a huge rainstorm and everything, we can tell people we close it down, we don't park it there. All the days of the year that we have, we need to be utilizing that space. It would be cheaper to run a shuttle from that area and just have a shuttle that comes in. I mean, it's walkable. People walk in cities all the time, block after block after block. We're talking a couple of blocks here. And of course, if you got rain, you got 100-degree weather and things of that nature, having a shuttle. So anyway, I'm bringing that up because we have opportunities to address some of the parking that's being taken up now with employees. The other thing is the Church of Christ site, the Methodist Church site. When we were talking to the Church of Christ at one time, and we couldn't quite make a deal with that, to put a parking garage there where they have retail restaurants on the bottom, and then they get to use that when they need it, and all day Sunday and Wednesday nights and things. But we have that, all weekday long that would be virtually empty from the church. I mean, they may have school there going on, but there's plenty of parking. We could have done that on that site. Those are things we still need to explore. The Methodist Church site is another site over here Matt brought up. Absolutely, we need to be looking at that. There's all types of opportunities in the future for more parking here. We're not strapped for opportunities. We just have to make them work somehow. And there's always a way to make those work eventually. And I would just say that I'm with Alderman Baggett on this, that I think it's going to take vision on this board. We have to have more vision, and we have to look down 25, 50, 75 years from now to say, what if I was 50 years into this, what would I look at that and say, dang, they missed the boat. They should have put more parking underground and utilized that space. I'm with you on that. I think that's really huge. There's a few other things, but I'll leave them go.
If I might just follow up on part of what you said, we've had conversation with Fourth Avenue, and I think they're pretty happy with what they've got right now as far as people paying to park there. And the conversations we had with a company that would build a garage there, prefabricated, it was not very encouraging because the number of spots you would get, if I recall, were not that great.
It's
So
a pretty
not
small
that
footprint. Yeah.
It looks like a great spot, but it's probably not. Need a bigger spot.
And then the church would contemplate where they're going to add on to that area, and that was part of that discussion too. The combination of the limited size of the site, our standards for putting liner stores on the building, plus the church, pretty happy where they're at, as Mayor Morris said, with their arrangement. That's today.
Right.
You're right.
That's today. We don't
That's
know
right.
5 years down the road. Things change,
Yep.
and then people change. Leadership's change.
Leadership change too.
On churches and boards, and so it's like, I would say caution us all, let's not get in that box and shut the lids. Let's make sure if we're in the box, we at least are looking outside and looking down the future, because a lot of possibilities still out there. And I think we're amiss to not jump on and utilize Bicentennial Park up there. I think it's just foolish for us not to pursue that. Anyway, thanks.
Alderman Peterson.
Well, again, to talk about underground parking right in this area here, I think Clyde and I are the only two who remember when the bank was built right over here, and we used to have the underground space there. That was where anything like the Chamber of Commerce banquet or something like that was being held, and we went to many things that were held there. And they also had a little balcony where they had a lot of offices, and this was all underground.
Undergrade.
And they had to stop doing that because water was leaking in there. And I have had many, many, many years ago someone who was a water person, I've forgotten what they called that, when they said that the water level is right below the surface here. And I know we have had some people look at that and say, oh, not so true. But I can remember very, very, very well going to things over there that they had to stop doing because water was leaking in. So please keep that in mind. I mean, maybe the people that are saying that this will be okay right now, you know, that's a place where you need to have a third party look to see what's going on, because as I say, that is absolutely what happened in there. And I mean, they lost a lot of space then. So
I know we've done some analysis on this site as
I know.
part of this initial review and had borings taken, et cetera. So we can share that with you again, but that was to get at that very issue, that how far could we go down and how would that impact our ability to add parking, subsurface parking here. So that's already been part of this process, but we can highlight those findings. And that was an outside specialist who worked with the design team on that aspect.
I would love to find out about somebody who actually worked there, but I mean, it's been decades ago now, you know, that they had to stop using that. But I don't know. I remember going to things there, but I don't remember, you know, who would know maybe
Yeah,
some of the problems.
Brad had mentioned something, and we can come back with that because it sounds that we should do additional due diligence on looking at not only one, but perhaps another layer of parking and see what that entails, see how many spaces it produced, see what the cost implications are, and we can do that.
And
Bring that back, and also look at Alderman Peterson's.
Well, that wasn't really my own question, just that we started talking about that part of it. But to also think about, now, if we were trying to sell this property here, would we try to sell the garage, or would we want to keep it and just sell maybe this area here? I mean, has it been a all or nothing, sell the whole?
Well, I think that would be your call in terms of what you would want to sell and what you'd want to put out there for those offers. So that's why we did a separate, we broke that out and getting the appraisals just so that you could look at it and consider that option. And would the potential buyer want that parking garage or not? They may want you to continue to own it and maintain it.
That's what I was
They
wondering.
probably would.
No, because that would be convenient. And we do own the 4th Avenue
Yes.
and maintain it. You know, and of course we'd continue to do that. And actually, to go back to think of some things, because another alternative that has been talked about more here than it has any other time is the potential H.G. Hill property on Columbia Avenue. And I really had a question about, you know, all the planning that had been done on a building for this site. Are you saying that you have to start all over again? I mean,
What Joe's,
We can walk through that.
we'll walk through that with you. Understandably, the space needs assessment and that has been done wouldn't have to be
'cause I was
over
gonna say.
because we tried to project out years into the future. How the building's laid out based on a specific site would have implications. And Joe, go ahead and review what you had shared and just at the high level.
So I don't have my fancy illustrations with this one. But as Vernon said, the items that can likely be transferred there are on that first column. The space needs, which is how many departments we have, how many people are in each department, how many square feet each of those people need. can likely be transferred. All that work that we've done up to date. The programming, which is what's in the departments, what departments need to be next to other departments, all the planning elements. The last one's the space standards, the Lego building blocks of the building. All that can be transferred. When we go to the other column, what likely must be redesigned are the massing and elevations. For instance, I mentioned that this is not a prototypical building. It's anything but a prototypical building. It's a very unique building in a unique location in a unique city, situated on Public Square, with 3 stories tapering down to 2 as you go down to Church Street. With the front of the building pulled back to match the courthouse. I mean, everything is specific to this location here. So therefore, the massing and elevations, and really that lends itself to the plans as well, because you would be changing the massing and elevations as you go on. But the site layout, which is the next one there, obviously our site layout that we have right now is very specific to the site. The access points, where the stormwater drains to, all those elements would not transfer to another site. And
So the
then,
stormwater that's coming off of the building,
not necessarily the stormwater that's coming off the building, the stormwater that's coming off of the site. So like,
Site might have-
so for instance, where your site drains to, all the design that we've done, that you see on the screen right there, all that site work that's designed, where our underground detention is, just all the work that's been, all the civil engineering work that's been done today on the site would change if you're at a different site.
They're very site-specific.
so the civil engineering is just site-specific here?
Yes.
What would the cost be to redesign? So I hear what Alderman Peterson's saying. That the scale of the cost, because I feel like it's going to be much smaller than the cost to redesign everything is really not that big of a cost.
So the
in
cost to
scheme of
redesign
things.
everything, it would be essentially what we spent up to date on schematic design, which is several $100,000, but it's not millions of dollars. So you're right, it's not a huge thing. The reason this was kind of put in here was because the board has asked a few times if you could literally pick up the site,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
plans,
right, uh-huh.
and build them somewhere else, and that's essentially
And that would
the
save
point.
us a few $100,000 from
a few
redesign.
$100,000, right?
It's a $99 million project.
Yes,
So there's some other factors that
there
we
are
could
some
cover.
other factors. Yes.
But it'd also be site specific. And
Are you done, Alderman Peterson? I've got Alderman Blanton.
Sure, go ahead.
You know, I think this is one of those monumental decisions for this board. I think what I know is that what we have is not going to work where we are today. After 12 years of living in this world, City of Franklin, this place is bad. So we do need a new city hall. Much like Patrick said, I think we hoped that there would be this clear, definitive answer once we got these appraisals back, and that didn't happen. What we also know, it's never going to get any cheaper.
Yep.
So for me, I was, as I said, when we first found out about the opportunity to have another site, whether swap or whatever, which we know that's not going to happen, I was intrigued. I still remain intrigued, but what I have to think about is if we vacate this space and go wherever else, what could be here? And if you think about us being this award-winning, quaint Main Street with the footprint that this allows for development, no matter what it is, the use would probably be very similar to retail, commercial,
Restroom, maybe.
that type of thing, and maybe some residential, whatever. It would really gravely impact traffic in our downtown corridor. So you have to think about that. You have to think about this building, if it were to be repurposed as City Hall, it would pretty much maintain the flow of what it's really contributed for the last 50 years or as long as we've been here. So I have to weigh those things about that sensible kind of pros and cons. I still think that, you know, activating Columbia Avenue corridor has some potential, but I have to worry about what we're leaving behind. And do I really, in my mindset, think about us hosting events and having the front door to the square? No, that doesn't blow my skirt up. I mean, we can have an event at the square without having to have bathrooms here for us to go use or the community. So I think what's good for me, what I see happening is we've got to make some hard decisions and really own it. And I think we've got to ask for the community input and put this for public hearing and figure out what we're hearing from our citizens. But the positives I do know, I just laid out. But I also am fearful if we vacate this, and this is what I want to drive home more than anything, what we could do to the dynamics of what we celebrate and have celebrated. Just today, Southern Living did something about Franklin. It will change. It will change what we experience and what we celebrate. So that's what I wrestle with. So just contributing to the conversation, that's my input for today.
Appreciate it. Alderman Potts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yep. Alderman.
Oh, did I take your word? We didn't even talk.
Exactly. It's very close to that, and it is. I'm sitting here, and someone made the comment, and I appreciate everybody's comments because I really have sincerely been listening and taking these in, and the emails that we get from constituents. And somebody made reference to the 25, 50, and 100-year vision. That's the decision that we're making right now. And there is the intangible that others recognize, as we were recognized today for, for whichever publication did the recognition for us, as I'm trying to pull it up here. Southern Living Magazine, the South's Best Cities in 2023, and it's featuring us. There is the intangible of being right here. The underground parking, I've heard it, and I do hear what you're saying, Alderman Peterson, and I do hope that there is technology actually that can address that. It has to, especially after the floods that we had in Nashville. They can incorporate that. I am concerned, though, about the water table. I think that you raise an excellent idea. We may find that we get to the water table and do that analysis, and we aren't able to go as deep as we might want to, and we're not gaining all the spaces that Alderman Barnhill has referenced. So I am concerned about inflation. I have bigger concerns, though, in my casting the vision of what's going to be down here, what's the density going to be, what's going to change on this site that we can't control. Somebody's going to come in, whether it's retail, whether it's commercial, whether it's townhomes, whether it's homes 2 floors up, and all those things that go with that. It's attractive to look at activating Columbia Avenue. I reached out to some of those business owners, but I have more risk in what we're losing right here. That's the price that I'm looking at, not just the cost of the scenarios as we've laid out there on the screen. Alderman Baggett, I think that if there is the need for third party, that I know staff would come to us and say, there's an opportunity here for us to double check, if not triple check, as we look to make a 25, 50, and 100-year decision right now. And I'll go ahead and go on the books right now and say we've got to have underground parking. There's no question about that moving forward. All right. I feel like the slower that we go, the more this is going to cost us. And there was a slide in here that showed a little bit of that on, I think it was slide 6, maybe slide 7, of just what delaying for three years or so, or several months, what it could do to us. So those are just my thoughts. And so staff, thank you for all the hard work that you guys have been putting in on this.
Go
I have
ahead.
one quick question. Has there been any analysis initially done, because I think you mentioned that before, but initially done for underground? I know we had soil testing.
Yes.
So to what extent have we had an analysis done? I know there'll be more that has to be done, but initially, what is that initial analysis that was done that shows us this possible?
Right. So we've had water sampling, water level sampling done. We've had geotechnical, including in the bore. So we had it done by 2 different geotechnical engineering groups have done that, and they've determined where the water levels. The last one that I believe we sent out, and we can resend it again. The last geotechnical report actually has the water levels and associated, tied to the river levels as well. So it shows you what the river level was at the time the water sample was taken, and it shows you where the variations would be, the fluctuations with that would be. And so we have all that information. We can send it out to you as well. Just to address this a little bit further, we are talking about a garage. It's a garage that we can move cars if there were problems. The space next to us here, they have a finished basement right now. We've spoken with them. They have stated that as long as we have a redundant pumping system with
Yep.
remote
So you
monitoring,
do. Mhm.
they were perfectly comfortable with their finished space that they have right now. And they have had some problems in the past, and we've documented that as well, and we, again, can send that to you. So I think this
Yeah,
has been sent at
that's
once, but
fine.
we can send it again.
It's fine.
But so we've done that work. I will say, I'm just going to, while I'm talking, going one level further in the parking garage, water can be dealt with, as you mentioned. The challenge is that we are not likely to hit bedrock, or we're maybe the very tip. There's pinnacles, we might hit some of those. If we go another level, we're very likely into full bedrock, which will become expensive, and you're going to hear a lot of pounding and whatnot. So the costs go up because of the additional rock removal that would be required in shoring.
I want to make clear, I'm not sitting here advocating. I just want to look at all of it. I don't want the downtown neighbors to think I want us to start jackhammering down here.
No.
I just think looking at all the
Right.
options because of the parking. But thank you for mentioning that. The
Well-
two is not, I mean, explore it, but it's not
No.
I'm not advocating necessarily.
Well, you maybe have to have some of that, but definitely remote pumping monitoring would have to be done. And then the angle of the floors are key, and then pumps and whatever you have, because people all over the United States have to have underground parking. I know they've done some of the stuff in Nashville that in the new technology and the things that they can handle, that they can prevent most of the leakage. Now, you may get some water in there, but you don't want a lot of water. You just want, a wet floor possibly or something, drains and those things where you can pump it out. So there's all this technology today that people are actually using that I would say that we would have to explore when we get to that point. So, and the other thing I just want to mention, everybody talks about downtown traffic. We want downtown traffic. I want downtown traffic because we don't want pass-through traffic. And that's one of the things was greatly helped when you had Mac Hatcher open. So we were able to get some relief with Mac Hatcher opening. And then once that gets completed in the years from now, that would be even better. But we want traffic. If you go to all the historic cities, you are in traffic. Going into their core, you are in traffic. And they love it because it is money to the core. It is money to the historic visitors, the visitors coming to visit their historic cities. You talk St. Augustine, you take Williamsburg, Savannah, Charleston, all of those. You go walk in, you drive into the places, and you have unbelievable traffic, but the traffic moves. You're not sitting in traffic forever. You move, and you get to your destination. And people flock there. It does not keep people away. We want to get rid of traffic downtown, then we have killed our downtown. So every time people to bring up traffic, you talk about the factory, you talk about Middle 8. Yes, but it's moving traffic, it's widening roads, or not so widening roads, but putting decent turn lanes in, signals, moving traffic. So, I'm not worried about traffic. But Brandy, you brought up a good point. If if we did something else here, it would probably bring in a lot more traffic than City Hall.
Not the good kind.
No, that's right. Probably, on Monday, Wednesday, but Monday, Friday. But those are just my points. Thanks.
Anybody else?
Thank you.
You're welcome, Vice
Thank
Mayor.
you.
Go ahead.
Number one, I don't think City Hall traffic would be good traffic. I think traffic coming here, if there's something to attract them other than coming to City Court on Tuesday mornings to pay a ticket, probably would generate more tax revenue than it would be some of these other things we're asking about. I've missed the point someplace. I'm not advocating that we sell this. I am advocating that we be honest with ourselves and with the public in looking at that H.G. Hills property and seeing if it's viable for us to use there. I don't believe that we're harming downtown Franklin by not having City Hall here. I think that there's a possibility that we're having a smokescreen thrown up and all the economic viables and whatever having it here. But you could put this up here, and you won't disturb a city employee or you won't disturb, because you'll build that before you ever abandon this. Then have somebody come in here who is a visionary and develop this piece of property here. But I'm not saying we have to sell it. They doesn't have to sell it to buy that property up there. I mean, and just look at some of these things. I don't think we've given it a fair shot in the location as far as what we've done. And that's what I'm saying. If for some reason or other that turns out to be where that is not feasible and the H.G. Hills property is not available, not feasible, then I'm gonna back out and say, we put it here. I think we've got to have underground parking here, and the design, we've already got 50% of the design, schematics, whatever it is, done. I'm gonna back out of that. I'm gonna quit worrying the mayor here about what we're doing on this property or not doing on this property. So that's all I'm saying. I'm not advocating selling this.
So what is it that, for the H.G. Hill property, that you don't have to?
You got an appraisal?
Well, we don't have an appraisal, and I don't know that we have the.
Okay.
We have a county assessor's land value.
That's what we've got. I don't call that an appraisal, but you may get, that may give you a roundabout number. And I'm gonna tell you, guys, Hood's Liquor Store didn't want to sell when they condemned his property over for the police station. Neither did the Kubota place, and neither did those other businesses there necessarily want to sell. But they were forced into selling, and you now have the police station at that location there. But just, we're sitting here looking and arguing and wondering about what we need to do and where we're going to go. We're going to have 3 years of displaced employees if we put it here.
So it's an appraisal that you think would be necessary for you to think further about it. Anything else that would help you move the needle?
I'd like to ask the whole board what you need to make a decision.
Right.
All due respect, let's look at, I've heard public hearing, I've heard, I want to see the geotechnical stuff, which we've given and we'll give you again. If you go deeper, we can try to give you some assessment of that. I think there's a sense that you do get into bedrock, which gets into cost and other disruption. We can try to answer those for you. I guess I'm trying to see, what do you need? We've given you costs. If you get an appraisal, we've told you it's going to cost you somewhere between $3.5 and $5 million of site costs. If you need to buy it for, say you buy it for the county assessor's number, or you round that up to $4 million, you're spending $8 to $10 million on the site.
Okay.
In addition to the $96 million that's projected with surface parking. So you're at $107 million for the project.
Okay, bring that back then. I have no
Well,
problem
it's
with it.
here for you. We're
Okay.
looking at it. So I'm asking you, what do you need? Do you need a formal appraisal, or are you willing to make an assumption, or what is your pain point in terms of cost in the project? If you say you don't want to sell this property, you want to separate that out. I'm not sure how we can help you with that, but I want to try to find how we help you make a decision or define a process that'll help us get there, as opposed to kind of just picking one element at a time. I'm trying to bring us back to the whole decision-making process, and what the whole board needs to be comfortable making that decision. I know it's a huge decision. We laid out two options, which is focus on this site and complete schematic design, or go into a process that helps you formally identify other sites, and then you're going to need to go down a path of assessing each of those in terms of land costs, site costs, and the nature of the construction on that site. We've given you sort of a generic version of scenario 3 and 4, which is with or without structured parking, and you can maybe make some reasonable takeoffs on the H.G. Hill site based on essentially scenario 4 by adding in some property costs and some site costs. We can start coloring those in. It's going to be ranges, and I don't know what appraisal may give you something, but we found we didn't get all the answers we thought we might get when we looked at the City Hall site. So I don't know if that helps you or not, but I just throw that out as help us help you identify what's going to work through what we know is it's a challenging decision-making process. No question.
I appreciate Alderman Baggett pointing out that we didn't want to raise taxes to pay for this. And I think that we have a financial model that we've looked at that shows that we can pay for the building, what we've been looking at. You know, I'm concerned with the team that we have. I mean, they're kind of on hold right now. They're not going to hover forever. They've got other work they'd like to be doing. So I'm not sure where their timeline is. But I'm like Eric, I'm not sure what else we need to make a decision other than what you've mentioned tonight. I'm ready for us to make a decision and move forward.
Well, one of the.
It's never, it's always going to be controversial. Doesn't matter where we go.
I just, whenever you were looking at the one example of a preliminary analysis of the H.T. Hill site, we're talking about you said stormwater, but also off-site water and off-site sewer. And I mean, some of that stuff we probably would know without having to spend a lot of time and effort. I mean, because don't we?
That's why we've given you that range of costs. Those are an educated estimate and also projecting out the timeline. We do know that site somewhat just because of the redevelopment that's been looked at already there.
Well, that's what I was
So we're
wondering
giving
about.
you at least what we think is a reasonable range to assume for those site and off-site improvements.
Well, would they have been required to do a lot on the?
Yes.
On the.
This is, whoever develops this site is going to face some of these same challenges in terms of street improvements, stormwater improvements, et cetera. You've got utilities. It's a older site that needs some of those upgrades.
Well, whenever we did the things that we did on Columbia Avenue and also built the police headquarters there, what did the city do for those two situations that might have made some difference in this? Because the police headquarters also back up to Acton, which, by the way, is spelled wrong up
Yes,
here.
it is.
But
Spell
anyway.
check.
But that is some of the things that I I'd like to hear a little bit more about. Although it's this particular site, this in some ways had. I looked back and did find some pictures of they had all these buildings on that site at the back and could have the parking in the front. I know a lot of people around here don't like the idea of parking on the front, but let me tell you, speaking of parking, I am somewhat concerned about the safety of underground parking. I mean, in the sense of after maybe I would leave a meeting here, going out and having to go underground to a parking garage. I have known over the years that there have been problems in Nashville with the safety of people who have gone out to garages in the evenings. And so that is something that really needs to be thought about also. And that would mean that a lot of people are doing that. But anyway, and back to the H.T. Hill site, and I know they had talked about doing some other things. I have no idea that it never got to the planning
They
commission or
never
anything.
submitted.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But there also is a need for a grocery store somewhere around there.
Amen.
And I know I think they were looking at maybe Publix, and Publix decided they were not interested. But I mean, something like Aldi or, some other thing that would have groceries that could also be very helpful in that area. And so that just on the offside thinking about that.
In order to move forward, I don't think I need anything else, because even if we're gracious with the site improvements, let's just say if you look on the last page or the last financial model,
Okay.
scenario 4, let's just say that let's just say the site improvements are 2.8 million. Okay, it's the difference between the cost of scenario 1 and 4. Let's be generous. Let's say we conservative. It's the same cost as here. So really, it boils down to Alderman Barnhill. It boils down to what we can sell this for. That's the only, in my opinion, and that's why I've said I don't know that there's any way for us to really know that unless we put this piece of property on the market, because that is the linchpin of what we can sell this for versus what we'd have to buy that for. That is the ultimate savings, because the construction costs, seem to wash out. And I will tell you this, inflation contingency of 3.5%, by choosing scenario 4, you were also saying a 3.5% inflation is what we're going to have over the next few years. And guess what, folks? That ain't going to happen. If I really wanted to be honest with this, we would do this with what do you say, Alderman Barnhill, 5%?
I'd say 5 or 6.
And guess what? That's going to make this even look worse. Again, without us putting this thing on the market, this piece of property on the market, and someone coming in here and offering some crazy money, but then, as Alderman Blanton said, well, guess what? They're going to pack every square inch full of use in this place, and then we'll have more signs in yards.
Alderman Burke.
Please, no more signs. Oh, my gosh.
Wish you hadn't mentioned the signs.
Yeah, I was doing
No,
just
it's
fine, you
fine.
said that. Yeah, and the big thing is, even if we did sell this or lease this space out, the big question that nobody can answer unless we wait a long time to get that answered is what goes here. What is going to replace? And I think Randy brought that up really remarkably well to how she presented that, because, it is about the risk and Jason too. What are we risking? What are we losing here? And so for me, I would just like some more information on the boring, on the geotechnical stuff. If we have any additional information there, how many floors we could actually get there and how they see that. That's just a little bit more information I would like. And the economy and the interest rates, we'll see how that goes in 2024. So 2024 to 2028, depending on what happens in DC, is really going to dictate where we're headed here. And that's a crystal ball that nobody has. And we can't sit around and wait to look into that crystal ball. We can't wait to look into that in 2024 and 2025 to find out what's going on. I think we have to move ahead. I think I've got everything I need, and I'm satisfied with moving ahead right here.
Can we move to the next item? Which is Resolution 2023-25, adopting a community decency policy.
We should have had that
Hey,
before this
Mr. Mayor?
meeting.
I should have been nicer to you, shouldn't I, Vice Mayor?
So, Mr. Mayor?
I don't say you could be any nicer to me.
May I speak to this before we get
Go
started?
ahead, you go ahead and speak to.
Okay, real
Alderman.
quick. I would like to take this off the table because unfortunately, the last 3 weeks have not been too great for me. And I have not, and I'm glad to be here tonight, but I'm thankful to be here tonight. So I'd ask this board to allow me to have some more time because basically I've not been able to meet with Shauna. And what's before us is not what I want before us. There are some other things I think that really I've had some time to sit around and work on. And there's some things I would like to bring forward that's a little bit better than what we have before us because I've heard your questions and your concerns. And I really think we can get to what we need and answer the questions and concerns that was brought up by this board, which were really good things to bring up. So I would ask that we don't spend our time, waste our time talking about this tonight because I can't vote on what's before us tonight. I want to bring something a little different. And if you would allow me to just go into the next item and not discuss this tonight and waste our time on something I'm not even interested in bringing right now. And then if we can delay our vote on that, how do we need to do that? Do we need to do that at the because we had postponed it to.
Well, you've got it
to
specifically
date
deferred
certain.
for board action to
Yeah.
May 23rd.
Yeah.
So at the 23rd, you'd need to defer it
Defer it.
again or whatever
Yes.
your action is there.
All right.
So there's nothing you need to do tonight, but on
Right.
the 23rd, it will appear
So-
on your agenda.
Yeah, I would make a motion on that night then as well to defer it for about probably at least a month or so. Because I need to get with Shauna, we need to talk. I want to bring forward to you some other ideas I had. So if that's okay, thank you very much.
Sounds good. We'll move to
And
item
if
3.
other aldermen have feedback too, I mean, this moves from being something one alderman's brought forward to the boards at some point. So we welcome your feedback on that
Right.
as well. So
Sure.
that's part of the dialogue.
Yeah, and the other thing is, may I ask too, that what about the clause that you're going to put in, that you recommended to be put into the application for the special events? Do you add that? Do you need a vote from the board on that, or do you need?
I'm not sure what you're referring to. We already have elements in the special events that talk about
But you gave us that email.
compliance with state law, specifically talks about adult entertainment components, and then has people specify their live performers. So that's already there. What we have done in the meantime, because there were specific things that were identified, I did share with people who've received permits since then a more specific description, all of which is supported in what we enforce in the state law already
Okay.
around what behaviors are okay and not okay. It's really meant to provide clarity so that they know it's nothing outside of what is already in state law. We were careful on how we worded that. And it doesn't have any specific prescriptive punishment associated with it. And so that was really to try to help permittees have clarity about what we meant, so that if they had a situation, they could clearly identify it and they could ask for our help in removing a patron that was doing something they shouldn't do, or working with them in that way. It is really meant to provide clarity to them.
So you
about
weren't really
those.
adding anything to it, you were just clarifying that in that email that you sent us that you.
Well, it was,
mentioned?
I shared a letter with the folks who had received permits in the last probably couple meeting cycles.
sure.
And especially the folks that would have their event, such as the Main Street Festival.
Festival, right.
We've also got the rodeo parade. We've also got, of course, Pride, and I feel like there's another one I'm missing. But anyway, we
July
we
4th.
sent those to them to be clear about what that was while you were working on
Okay.
whatever you decided to do here. But nothing I put in that was not something we already enforce in terms of our understanding of state law.
Yeah.
And we didn't add anything else that may have been in the policy related to a certain kind of prescribed consequence for a violation. We didn't
No,
go
I
there.
didn't see anything.
And really kept it in your hands in terms of what you decide to do about issuing further future permits.
Okay,
Alderman Blanton? Okay.
thanks.
How about item 3, liquor license for Red Dog Wine and Spirits, Inc.? Everybody good? How about on items 4 and number 5, the applicant has requested that those be deferred until the work session of August the 8th, and the voting session for August the 8th is my understanding. So,
I do want to make one comment. Whenever the planning commission worked on this, it says, to rezone from plan so-and-so, and it added, plan from 12,320, I guess, square feet of, and to 17,000, but also on both of these documents here, if you look at the very first page of that, it also has added quite a number of types
Uses.
of development that could be included with it. It's not in the ordinance exactly, but it's on, if you look on
The cover page.
the cover page
yes, ma'am.
says adding several more uses, and the planning commission did not recommend approval for those. And so that is in both of those things. I know we're talking about change, but let me see, it's on, let's see, it would be on the Vintage at Watson Glen rezoning, the very last thing there. Oh, yes, look, yeah, if we could pull that up.
Yes, ma'am. If you choose to vote against the uses, that would be something that would be removed at One Stop, and we could update the documents. That is just, they did a cover page that was that they were consistent with each other, so that the cover page for the development plan and the cover page for the rezoning matched. But again, if you decided to go with the Planning Commission's recommendations to vote against the added uses, we could always make an update to that.
Okay, but I just want to make sure that it, the way it's presented to us right now indicates those would also be a part of it.
So what you're voting on in the rezoning is specifically the 5,000 square feet. The added
Exactly.
uses is something that would only be voted on in terms of the development plan, because you see those numbers are what you're voting on, and that
Exactly.
those uses don't change the zoning. They just change what's allowed on the development plan.
But the thing that they submitted with these has those uses. Both
I
of
do
them.
understand. I like I said, I think that is something that we can have the applicant update if you vote against having those uses in the development plan.
Right, it's not actually part of the ordinance, as Chelsea said. It's, the rezoning is only to add the square footage, and the permitted uses are per the actual development plan, so Chelsea's totally right on that. And we can get the applicant to update that, as she said.
Because on number 4, it says just to rezone, but the materials that came with it also show the additional uses, even though it just said to rezone. It
So
still said
since
that.
this is going to be deferred, what I can do is, and Greg is here, I can have him remove those
that.
from the rezoning and submit something that I can update those documents. So the rezoning does not reflect anything that has to do with the additional uses. Only the additional uses will be listed on the development plan for your decision.
And that comes with the second hearing.
Correct. That will come with the public hearing. Yes,
Right,
ma'am.
right. Okay.
Okay, everybody good on 4 and 5 and number
So they're going to be deferred to August?
August the 8th,
Thank you.
both work session and voting session. And the voting meeting tonight will ask for deferral to August the 8th. Thank you. And item 6 is Resolution 2023-23, amending the Eastworks District PUD subdivision to extend the vesting rights for the property located north of Meridian Boulevard and west of Carruthers Parkway, located at 9009 Carruthers Parkway. Establish a public hearing June 13th, 2023. So this extends it
2 years.
2 years.
No, and they probably don't need the 2 years. I talked with them, and it's, between COVID and the banking situation
Yeah,
right
yeah,
now, they
right.
need a few more. But they're anxious to get started, so they're not going to be hanging out for 2 years, trust me, from what I've heard. So,
Item 7 is Resolution 2023-29, providing a cost of living adjustment for recipients of the closed pension plan effective July 2023. And here comes Christine.
So earlier this year, we did adopt a policy after working with the pension committee and also getting feedback from you. And so this is really implementing that policy for what the adjustment we would make in July. So Christine, I think will walk you through that.
It's not going to go up until it stops blinking. So you just have to give it a second. And if it doesn't work, I can pull it up for you. It appears to be. Thank you.
Go ahead and hold it up for us.
Which attachment was that, Christine?
It is, starts with July 2023.
Perfect.
That's it.
Oh, sorry.
Oop.
I had it. I'm sorry.
Oh, and now I just got it.
Now it works.
Well, there we go.
Okay.
Then,
Well, she's
then I
got
can
it now.
control it. Thank you, Angie. I appreciate that. We have been before the board this time of year for my certainly in the years that I've been with you, serving this board, but for many years, this is the time period in which the staff has brought forth a cost of living proposal for the closed pension plan.
I think that's still yours.
No, it's not. It's hers. It's frozen.
Yeah, I
It's
don't
just
know why it's
frozen.
not.
Would you like
It's
me
not-
to do it for you?
It's not letting me
you like
advance, so
me to
maybe
do
we
it?
should I just,
I can take care of it.
okay. So we did want to give you just, of course, a little bit of background. This was, the policy was adopted by this board in January. Certainly, that's not been very long ago, but the policy does determine it sets a framework for determining the annual cost of living increase for the closed pension plan. The elements of the policy include the consumer price index, the change from March of the current year to the year before. The March CPI is available toward the late part of April, so that is relatively new information. We also, the other element is the funded ratio of the closed plan. The most recent valuation, we always receive that for the budget so that we can get that put in place for July 1st, but the full the full report's not available yet, but we do have, the licensed actuary has provided his letter of what the funded ratio is as of January 1st of this year. And so we do have those two elements. When we look back at the policy, we are in a funded ratio category. We're in the middle category. We're at just under 78%. I will point out that's a decline from 91%. We're going to talk in just a moment of the history, so that we did talk about that when the board was considering the policy. We have declined from 91 to 78%. Primarily, that's just because of what a very bad time December 31st of 2022 was for asset valuation. And this plan is on the calendar year. 12/31 was not a good time. 12/31 of 2021 was a very good time. And so we had significant declines in our asset valuation. And that is primarily the answer. There's also two other factors which the full report will show. We are decreasing the investment rate by 10 basis points over several years so that we will be eventually at 6.5%. When you decrease that investment rate assumption, you do have higher
Rate of return. Is
yes,
that
the
what you're-
rate of return for the plan. So we did, that does have a cost to it. And then, of course, we do have the, while it's certainly it's a very good thing for our employees, we do have a new salary schedule that was put in place. And that did increase salaries of active employees who are in the closed plan. And so that information is put into what the future liabilities of the pension plan are, because that's information we would provide to the actuary. So, but primarily the asset valuation for 12/31/2022 was not in our favor. So certainly, while we did have a change in that CPI that was around 5.5%, we're in that middle category, which the middle category has that cap of 2.5%. I thought just give a little background, because this is the first year that we've had the policy in place, but this is the very same historical chart you saw back from staff at the end of last calendar year. Just only difference is adding on the new year for the modern history of the funded ratio of the closed plan. We have been in this middle category now 8 times in what I might call the modern history of the plan. Of course, the plan is from 1971, but we've not always had the same requirements for having the valuation. Certainly, a lot's happened over those years, but this is as far as we can find as the apples to apples comparison. The funded ratio goes back to 95. So we have been, the one, there is something when you look at this, we've always been in that middle category or the high category every year but 1 year over all those years. The 1 year, the one exception was 2003. But we have been in this middle category now 8 times in that history, and the last time was in 2019. And then certainly the 80%, as we talked about, that's a benchmark of a well-funded pension plan, is to be at 80% or higher. The history of the cost of living adjustments for the closed plan, This is also the chart that you saw before, added on with the policy we put in place for the new year. We do have, and this is as far back as, of course, as we could find, was back to 92 through now 2024. Over that time period, including the high years and the lower years, the average is at 2.32%. The 2.5% for the policy for this year would be slightly above that. The 2.5% is exactly what is the actuarial assumption for a cost of living increase for this plan. There's that's an interesting. I went back to look at that, and that's the 2.5% is exactly what's in the actuarial study for the last several years. And then just next steps of the time frame. We're sitting here together here at the 1st of May. We're asking for your consideration to vote on a cost of living increase at the last meeting in May. And then the month of June is when the HR department provides letters. They prepare letters for all of the recipients of the plan. They also prepare a file for the paying agent, and that file is transmitted for a July 2023 effective date. And then actually the next item we talk about, if this board decides to act on that resolution, it is part of HR's process for June, because retiree health rates are also communicated in the very same letter in which the cost of living is communicated. So that's part of a big month of June for the HR department.
Questions?
Could you refresh it? Last year, we chose to not do. Will you refresh what we did last year? I know that was the percentage, but there was a decision that was kind of split on that, and then we just refreshed my memory on that. Is that this decision?
The closed plan had never had a policy in place.
Then maybe it was the open
There
plan.
had been a practice in place, because actually the plan documents for the closed plan just say that the Board of Mayor and Aldermen may approve a cost of living increase. It didn't say when. It didn't say it should or shouldn't. It just said it may. But there had been a practice of the July timeframe, and that the change in this CPI from March year over year had been approved by resolution by the board for implementation in July. Now, that had not always, like we said, this plan has been from 1971, so it hadn't always been the case, but in recent years, that had been the practice. And so last year, certainly the inflation rate was very high. Last year, we were looking at around a 7%. What the board had, through significant discussion, did approve a 4.5%. Because we were certainly balancing the health and the stability of this plan, which did not have a cost of living policy. Certainly, when we came back, we had several aldermen ask us to come back and provide what do other well-funded plans do, what other safe plans do, and we had significant conversation once we got kind of
So
past
that was for this plan?
Yes,
Okay.
that was for this
And
closed
then
plan.
the second question was, did you, the 1.5 million that we added, we did a $1.5 million addition or 1 year grant to this plan last year as well?
We have actually provided additional, you have provided additional funds the last, I believe, 3 fiscal years.
I believe it was 1.5
last year.
Yes.
Yeah, above what the actuary
And that-
recommended.
And it's still 77%, so it really
Yes,
wasn't
sir.
a bad
Yes,
situation.
there was a commitment. This board has been very committed to the health of this plan. There's nothing that this board has done or not done that caused that 1 year. I mean, we had close to a 15% decline in asset valuation, and you put in more than you had to put in. So it was, I'll use a technical term, it was a crummy year investment for investment returns. That was probably 90% of the answer of what happened. Was the point in time of 12/31 was not good. And we've had some growth since then. We certainly look at it throughout the year, but we always have to look toward 12/31. We've had some growth in the asset valuation, but it was not kind to us last year, and that's why we were below 80%.
Let's talk about the Resolution 2023-34, adjusting the city's contribution to health care coverage for retirees electing coverage in option 2.
So this is also something we looked at in our budget process, and as we looked at establishing health insurance rates, we're fortunate in this year and in this budget cycle that we're going to be able to hold the line on health insurance costs for our employees, and also looked at what we do with retirees. And this has been an area we've heard feedback on and questions about from our team, and so we wanted to recommend an adjustment to shift. And I guess you have slides that will cover this, so I'll maybe let you walk through that. But would shift the policy on how we share those costs with retirees. Just as context, our retirees, it's sort of a bridge program that works for our retirees between the age they retire and when they become eligible for Medicare at age 65. So this is a group that falls into that age category, and they use a higher deductible program called our option, what we call option 2. And so you had set a policy of 40% city, 60% retiree, and we'd like to suggest shifting that to a 50-50 share. We've also reduced the cost for we've reduced the deductible for those folks as well, and the total out of pocket. So it is a benefit to those retirees. We believe we can make those changes and live within the existing budget just by looking at our overall experience, which has been a little lower than what we had projected in recent years. So we think our experience drives, from a budgetary standpoint, really staying around the same cost to the city, but changing that policy to be this 50-50 split, and give a little more relief to retirees in terms of the deductible and the total out of pocket.
And how many people are really affected? How many people are there that have retired that are under 65?
We currently have 30 on this plan. Now, we have another retiree medical that has a smaller group that only has folks between ages 62 and 65. This is the larger of the two groups. So this is not a large group, so but it's certainly significant to the folks who are on it. And I do have something to show you, a breakdown of what people select within the categories of this plan that talks about the demographics. Eric did a great job of explaining the background on the plan and how the history on the city split versus the retirees. This is what we're proposing by the resolution for your consideration, using real insurance numbers, monthly premiums for the current year, and then if approved by the board for next year, moving from a 40% city split to a 50% cost share. For the single retiree, that would be savings of about $71 a month. Retiree plus spouse, a savings of $152 a month. Did want to point out, HR provided that certainly this is not a large group, so the folks are turning 65 and going off, and you have people retiring and moving on, and there's some timing. There's not always the same number, certainly every month necessarily, but currently 53% of our folks elect single coverage, another 40% do the retiree plus spouse. A little over 90% are in those two categories, and that's pretty typical. We don't have a whole lot in the family and the retiree plus children categories, but we do offer that, even though they certainly are the amounts that you see above. But that just gives you a flavor of who's in that program and what they elect. And so we also, as Eric said, in addition to recommending, and this is actually what's in the resolution, which would move to the different cost share, but we also are looking at, we want to do at the same time some plan design to just, we want to lower deductibles and out of pocket a little bit. We believe we can be able to absorb that. If we can go to our next slide, we can just show you that we're recommending to do that plan design change of reducing those by $250. We certainly understand that healthcare costs are significant, and when folks are retired, we've been looking very closely at this plan to see if we would be able to, within our current appropriation, be able to do something to help both on premiums as well as on the money out of pocket and the deductibles. So if this resolution is approved by the board at the end of the month, this would be part of that letter that's prepared by the HR department to announce to retirees in June.
Very good. How about the interlocal agreement, contract number 2013-0043 with the City of Franklin, Williamson County for the collection of property taxes?
And for the last 10 years, the Williamson County Trustee's Office has billed and collected property taxes for the city of Franklin. That has been, in the last 10 years, as staff, we believe it's been a very successful program for the city, but especially for our property owners and our taxpayers who pay to the county trustee's office. As staff, we have an excellent working relationship with Karen Paris, our county trustee, and her staff. And that's something that Karen Paris reached out to us and was willing to continue that arrangement. The first 10 years of the agreement, there was no increase in the fee at all as postage and technology and everything else went up. She did not ask for an increase in the first 10 years. She asked for an increase from $4 a parcel to $5 a parcel for the next agreement. We do believe that is fair given the increase in costs that are experienced. And last night, the Williamson County Commission approved the agreement on their behalf. And then we'll be asking you to consider approval at the second meeting in May. And the city administrator did go ahead and put this agreement, the cost for this new agreement, into his proposed budget that he'll be releasing later this week.
This is a good deal for the city, both cost-wise, but it's very efficient for working with our residents. So this is a very good deal. We've been really proud of how this has worked out, working with the county on this. So great to keep it going, and this will add another 10 years to that arrangement.
And the only thing I will point out different from the item tonight that you'll see at the end of May is that when we were preparing this item, we believed that this was going to be an amendment extension to the 2013 agreement, and Shauna has now gone through it, and this is now going to be a new agreement for 2023. So it's exactly the way I described it tonight, but it does have it's going to be a separate agreement, not an amendment to the 2013.
Item 10 is Resolution 2023-26, rejecting the apparent low bid from Norris Brothers as a responsive but not responsible bid and awarding the construction contract, City of Franklin contract number 2022-0023 to SBW Constructors, LLC, in the amount of $3,592,727 for the Adams Street Water and Sewer Improvements Project. Everybody's shaking their head. How about item 11, Williamson County Growth Plan?
Good job.
Yeah, you just spoke so long, we just kept moving along. Williamson County Growth Plan and Franklin Urban Growth Boundary update.
So we've talked about this, I don't know, off and on for the last couple years, and now it's starting to move into the more formal part of the process. And Emily's going to walk through that, and we'll take your guidance on any actions you need to take. But we're starting to get into some certain specific timelines as the clock starts to tick in this process, this more formal process. But the content you've seen multiple times and given us good guidance and feedback on. So there should be no surprises on that element. So take it away, Emily.
Yeah, so this is something, as Eric mentioned, we've been talking about for quite a while. On May 1st, Mayor Anderson submitted a letter to all the mayors actually initiating the formal process. The clock doesn't really start ticking yet for the 6 months that we have until the convening committee first meets, but this is the formal initiation of the process. So what it looks like really moving forward is from May until mid-June, we're gearing up for that first meeting of the coordinating committee, so each jurisdiction really has some time to update who their respective representatives will be. And I'll get into that membership kind of later here, but previously, the appointees were, that the mayor made were yourself and Roger Lindsay, our Planning Commission Chair, and John Schroer as a citizen representative, and then Eric serving as a representative of the largest municipal utility, being the City of Franklin Water and Sewer.
To clarify that, the mayor is a designated seat on that. And then the mayor appoints 2 representatives, but you appoint the representative of the utility. So the board voted 2 years ago to put me in that position. If you want to revisit that or make that, that is the seat that the board has the opportunity to act on. The mayor makes those other appointments, including himself. But the one you have the responsibility for is your role as sort of overseeing the utility. And the Franklin Water Management Utility is the largest municipal utility in the county. So that is something you can give us guidance on if you're okay with the direction from the previous board, or if you want to act as a board on that, that is your call. But we should probably do that either the next meeting or the first meeting in June, so that we're ready to go when the coordinating committee starts acting.
Alderman Berger.
I'm perfectly fine with you representing us, Eric, personally. And Mayor, have you appointed the 2 appointees that you get to appoint? Have you done that yet?
I've previously appointed Roger Lindsay and John Schroll.
Okay, so are you keeping them in place?
I feel very comfortable with them because they've been at the meetings and they know what's going on.
All right.
Are fully informed.
Okay, so they'll stay in that position?
That would be my preference at
Are
this
they willing to
point.
do that? Okay, I just wanted to know.
I'll actually reach out to them and make sure that they still want the time commitment.
Okay, thank you.
And then in mid-June, the coordinating committee will have their first meeting. They'll set up, the rules of procedure, elect a chair, vice chair, secretary, and really discuss how they're going to move forward. Then in July and August, each municipality will conduct 2 public hearings on their own. So the way we did it last time when we originally created the UGB was we did 1 public hearing at the planning commission level and then 1 at the board level. So as of now, that's kind of what our timeline we've prepared indicates. But if you have different direction for us on that, we'd like to hear that as well. And then it just moves on. The coordinating committee will hear presentations in August from each of the jurisdictions regarding their urban growth boundary. And then in September, they will recommend any revisions based on what they've heard. Hopefully, those are very minimal to none, since we've put so much time into actually pulling together the maps already. But you never know what you're going to get into during this process. So I think we should be prepared that there may be some updates, especially after we hold those public hearings. And then in September, October, there will be a second coordinating committee meeting to hold all their public hearings. They have to have 2 public hearings on their own. And then in October, they will continue to refine and do approval of the growth plan. And then in October, we'll bring back what's been approved at that point for each individual jurisdiction to adopt and ratify at that point. So hopefully the timeline would wrap up by the end of the year, and then in January, it would be transmitted to the state for that committee to then review the official growth plan. Here again is just a recap of the coordinating committee membership. This is in your materials if you'd like to look it over. And then I have included the maps that we have thus far. These aren't the official maps yet, obviously, but these are the ones that have been drafted with all the municipalities during the last year and a half regarding each municipality's current city limits and their proposed growth boundaries. The first map is the proposed boundaries. The second map is the current UGBs and planned growth areas. And then the third map is just the city of Franklin UGB. The blue line represents our current urban growth boundary. The green line represents where the proposed growth boundary would be. This is a recap of what you've seen after many meetings, really adding in the Goose Creek Basin area down in the southeast, making some minimal changes to a few properties who requested removal along Goose Creek Bypass and Columbia Pike. And then also some property owners who requested removal around South Hall Farm where that development is, and then further out from South Hall where it would be difficult to serve with sewer now that South Hall has been developed. And then lastly, there's the area up in the West Harpeth area where we had the Gentry Farm as well as one other parcel that requested to not be in the UGB. And then just finally, I would say these are the dates we're planning to hold our public hearings and have more information. So at the May 25th Joint Conceptual Workshop, we're planning to do this exact same run through as we've done tonight to bring the Planning Commission up to speed. And then on July 11th, we would have a resolution regarding adopting the proposed map to send to the convening or to the coordinating committee. And on July 27th, we would take that to the Planning Commission for a public hearing and a recommendation vote to the Board, Mayor, and Aldermen. And then on August 8th, the BOMA public hearing would be held and you would vote on that resolution. And that, again, resolution would be to approve the map as it is in this packet to send to the coordinating committee for consideration.
Alderman Baggett?
So you're expanding the Goose Creek, in the Goose Creek area. We had the Goose Creek study, and it's kind of gone silent. I assume that's because of the Envision Franklin process, and that's kind of being integrated into the Envision Franklin discussions and final kind of plan. Is
It
that right?
is.
Okay.
We actually are having a meeting internally with staff coming up in the next few weeks to talk about the next steps. We are in the process of creating a staff recommended land use scenario that's maybe a little different than what you've seen so far, but based on the feedback we got at the last joint conceptual workshop when we heard the Goose Creek update. And we'll be bringing that to the joint conceptual workshop in June, or maybe to the special joint workshop on June 12th.
Okay.
So that we can get feedback and incorporate that into the full Envision Franklin update when those draft recommendations come out.
Will that change will the kind of result of that impact the UGB line there, or do you think it's kind of, regardless of how that outcome, you still will probably recommend expanding it?
We will still recommend expanding the UGB at this stage, but there may be property owners that are
Right.
not pleased
That's what I'm
necessarily with the proposed land use, depending on where that lands. And of course, we're looking for your guidance as we bring more scenarios to you.
We just don't want a bunch of them coming back to us asking us to get out of it because there's better sewer and development,
from a-
alternative sewer in the county.
Well, from a growth boundary standpoint, this is reflecting the drainage basin. And so that's what we're trying to do here. The land use plan components can be worked out down the line, but this is where you can best serve it. And you have existing, it reflects the existing basin. So that's really what, from just the growth boundary, that's what we're doing here. Trying to sync that up with what makes sense from a infrastructure standpoint.
Yep.
Alderman Berger?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that because a lot of the commissioners I've talked to in my district and in different districts are worried, about the rural settings and everything. So cities that are healthy, they do expand. Healthy cities do have urban growth boundaries. That's what keeps them healthy. But the other thing is, I can speak for myself, but I'm very sensitive to the rural aspect of this. And when we see 96 East coming online with 4 and 5 lane road all the way out and eventually out to Triune, that corridor, there are people wanting to sell some of their properties and get them developed. We're going to really have to, I would like to, and I'm going to propose this later, that we do an area study over there. And that we do it in depth because we have that EGRA development coming along 96 eventually. And 96 East deserves an agri-development area to keep a lot of that rural looking. And you can develop along that corridor and not go back in too far. So there's a limit to how far you go back in, north and south. But of course, as you said, the drainage basins. And that is where I've told the commissioners too, when we were talking, I said, we really don't and should not encroach on any other parcels outside that area because it doesn't make sense. When you have a drainage basin, when you have gravity sewer, that's why, I think that's why we did a lot of annexation down off Paintonsville Road.
Exactly.
It made more sense. By the interstate, drainage basin, sewer availability. So I think a lot of the angst or worry about some of how far, the residents say, how far are you going to reach into the county? You're going to keep going and going and going. Well, actually, no, we can't really do that. And I don't see this board or any other board reaching out and going beyond our drainage basins where sewer is actually, gravity sewer flows. So I just wanted to make sure that we said that tonight because I know people are listening at home and they're saying, well, how far will you go? Will you come back the next time you do the urban growth boundary? And will you take a look at that and try to expand it? Well, it really makes no sense. And that's where the county should be developing or not developing and keeping the rural areas. So we have to be sensitive to that.
And we really looked at a 20-year boundary. That's what the state statute
Yes. Mhm.
outlines. And so this green boundary is what we think is realistic for a 20-year growth boundary, with the exception of potentially some of the farthest reaches along Carter's Creek, Columbia Pike, and Goose Creek. But we heard feedback from the board that we didn't want to remove that yet because we don't know about the future of those areas. And that's a great valid point. So we left those areas in, but they may be a little beyond the 20-year limit. But in Goose Creek, we really think for a 20-year growth pattern, what we've added along the basin line is really a good direction to go, and that boundary would be where we would grow into, but not past.
Yeah, and also I think it's good to point out, as we pointed out tonight on this map, that we have taken some out of the urban growth boundary where it did not make sense. So I thought it was very thoughtfully done. Thank you very much for your work.
And I'd point out that Commissioner Herbert and Commissioner Morton have been part of this advisory group up to this point. So, how about a potential zoning ordinance text amendment to remove gas stations as a permitted use in the neighborhood commercial district?
What other zonings do we allow them in?
I will get to that. I just wanted to kind of give you an intro into this. As Alderman Potts mentioned previously, we do allow gas stations in a number of different zoning districts, neighborhood commercial being one of them. And we have had recent citizen feedback that is not in agreement with that. So just to jump into Alderman Hanson's questions, gas stations are permitted with use regulations that I'll get into in the next couple slides, but they're permitted in the planned district, zoning district, when part of a development plan. We saw that back with West Haven a couple years ago, I believe, when they were proposing a gas station. So that had to be along with the development plan because it was the PD district. We also permit them in neighborhood commercial, regional commerce 6, regional commerce 12, and light industrial. And those are the only zoning districts that gas stations are permitted today. Here's a map of kind of where those districts are. You have the bright magenta pink color along with the darker maroon, which indicate regional commerce 12 and regional commerce 6 along the interstate corridor. You have the lighter brown areas, which indicate light industrial districts where they would be permitted. The lighter purple is the planned district, and you would only you would have to see those with a development plan to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen in order to approve a gas station in one of those districts. And then this lighter coral, kind of lighter red color that's interspersed is our neighborhood commercial district. You'd see it at Matt Catcher and Hillsborough Road. There's a neighborhood commercial node there. We have one down in Lewisburg Pike, where we've had some annexed properties that are non-contiguous. That's where the previous Henpeck Market was. We have some area down just south of Goose Creek Bypass, near the interstate. A neighborhood commercial node on South Carruthers, where there's currently a development under construction, along with another neighborhood commercial node just north of the park. And there's a few more interspersed throughout the city, including some off Liberty Pike, kind of near the railroad. But those are some of the areas today. And neighborhood commercial zoning is encouraged in Envision Franklin, really when we have new residential areas that come on board, to consider putting in those amenities and services that will serve the residents so that they don't have to drive all the way across town to get the daily services or amenities that they need. Gas stations obviously are an essential service, but they come along with some potential nuisances as well, so it is something to consider. So some of our use regulations are regarding access and the use itself. They're not to be located at an intersection of two arterial streets. This has to do with the access points and keeping traffic flowing and not causing conflicts with traffic. Then they're also not to be located adjacent to a residential lot unless they are approved as part of a development plan that's approved by BOMA. When gas stations are located at intersections where they are permitted, they should be designed with the fuel pumps and canopy away from the intersection and to the side or rear of the building. And then there's some other requirements that are architectural regarding pit streets for buildings and canopies, and there's some other canopy standards related to height, materials, lighting, and signage that I didn't really list on this slide. Those are the basic regulations we have today, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on where you think they are appropriate and what changes you might like to consider.
Go ahead, Alderman Paz.
Thank you,
This
Mr.
is
Mayor.
your baby.
Thank you. All right, it's been my baby now for almost 4 months, so. Emily, thank you. Really appreciate it. So I just want to give you guys a couple of details. Over the past 3 months, I partnered with the Franklin Alliance of Homeowners Associations for Ward 3's director, 20 HOA presidents that serve on that board, dozens of Ward 3 residents to address multiple properties where service stations are allowed based on our current zoning. This all started approximately 4 months ago during a development neighborhood meeting where it was mentioned that a service station would be breaking ground soon at the site where the Discovery Center was to be located on South Carruthers Boulevard. That's the area just north of what will be Southeastern Park. Over the past 3 months, I've had one open meeting attended by approximately 100 concerned citizens, one meeting exclusively with the 20 HOA presidents, which was at a scheduled FAHOA scheduled meeting, one open house attended by approximately 100 concerned citizens, where I was joined by Vernon Girth, our assistant city administrator, Lisa Clayton, our parks director, Paul Hosen, engineering director, and also Alderman Peterson has attended that meeting as well as several others. So thank you, Alderman Peterson. Additionally, one Ward 3 South Carruthers Boulevard input session, which is similar to an Envision Franklin session. It was hosted by Lockwood Glen HOA and the Franklin Alliance of Homeowners Associations presidents and members, as well as hosted by and really coordinated by Gamble Design Collaborative and Crescent Homes, and their divisional president and some leaders were also present at that meeting. approximately 75 Ward 3 residents attended. The bottom line is that Franklin citizens are concerned about the current zoning specific to service stations adjacent to neighborhoods and soon to be built parks. I want to give you a couple of examples, and if you'll look in, and I don't know if we can zoom in on the map as close as we can here into Ward 3, but just to point out, South Carruthers Parkway and South Carruthers Road, which is right where the hand is right now, up right there. That is the previously approved Discovery Center that failed to raise the funds to build their center. That particular node was opposed recently by Lockwood Glen, Falcon Creek, and Ladd Park, and several others. That node right there, a previous board passed in the excitement of having the Discovery Center there, and we jumped through some hoops to make that happen. Unfortunately, in changing the zoning, it left it open to a service station. At the time, I don't think anybody really picked it up, but now, yes.
Part of the original zoning when.
Yes, it was.
Okay, so we didn't change it. That was part of the original zoning when.
And Alderman Martin pointed out,
What was the name of that?
Oh,
Simmons
Simmons
Ridge.
Ridge.
Yeah.
That was part of the original zoning. So we didn't add it back in.
Right.
Just reverted back.
And that's what I was about to say,
Sorry,
actually.
the way you said that was like.
No. So,
A previous board passed it for the Discovery Center with all of the zoning that was applicable for service station. And because the Discovery Center didn't move forward, a new owner now owns the property and is putting that in. This is where this all kind of came about. The point being is, if you look at several of the other locations, and I'll summarize it quickly, Royal Oaks Boulevard and Oak Meadow, there was concern about a service station going in there. South Carruthers Parkway and Long Point Way, Henpeck Lane and Lewisburg Pike, Berry Farms has some concerns there. The light industrial area, Mac Hatcher Boulevard and Noah Drive, Sullivan Farms, Polk Place, Dallas Downs. There's also Regional Commerce, or RC6, which is the future Long Lane overpass in Old Paytonsville Road. That's Berry Farms has concerns, as well as Ladd Park, and then also Regional Commerce, which is RC12, which is that same overpass, the opposite side. The point being is that this is a lot of residential area, and I'm getting a lot of feedback in this area saying, we don't want a service station here. You know, it might be zoned appropriately, but we would like for the board to review this. And as you zoom in, either on your computers in these areas, you'll see that the north section there leads up to Highway 96. The south section leads down to the Goose Creek area. And those already has service stations in between. So is there a need for us to have them there? And that's why part of the discussion is here, as well as Long Lane, once that's going to be built out. So I'll present all of that background information to our board and open it for discussion.
what's the downside of removing it from neighborhood commercial?
I mean, I think at this point, it's more of a convenience, just consideration. But if our citizens, I mean, we generally base our zoning decisions based on community input and feedback. And if that's what we're hearing from the majority of citizens, certainly we would want the zoning to reflect that. So I'm not sure that there's necessarily a downside other than there might be a loss of some of the convenience of having a gas station closer nearby to some of these residential neighborhoods. But at the same time, if that's not what our citizens desire, I don't know that that's really a downside.
Alderman?
Me? Okay, you didn't say a name, so there's 7 choices.
I was looking at you, so I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. So my memory of history, Discovery Center to me never really came on my radar because it didn't happen. But when all of that was just starting to be envisioned and developed with Lockwood Glen and all of that stuff, interestingly enough, my memory doesn't mean it's gospel. My memory was that they loved the idea of neighborhood commercial, which included a gas station. And I think, and it doesn't matter, I'm just giving you where my head is. I think what's interesting is if you come to the dance after it's already there, it's a lot more palatable than after you've gotten there, and then you start seeing fluorescent lights and dumpsters and stink. And so I totally understand that neighbors that are established don't want it, and I'm fine with that. But I do think it was put there to serve those neighbors for the convenience. And I think because it never went in when it was supposed to, it's like anything, you get used to what's around you, and you would probably love the convenience. If you think about West Haven, I don't live in West Haven. Gabrielle, you can debate that their closest gas opportunity is on Downs Boulevard. I imagine they use it a lot. Maybe before Matt Catcher extension went in, I'm not going to pay those gas prices because it's convenience. So, in my memory, originally when it was put in as a perk, not as a detriment. But I think where we're getting hung up is because which came first, the chicken or the egg? Also, in my memory, Henpeck Market's always been a gas station. Now it's a daycare. So I don't know that would probably be another opportunity where there's 3 MAPCOs on Goose Creek. How that happened, I don't know. So I think we do probably need to look at it. But that's why I wanted to give you that background. It was packaged as an amenity. And then when the amenity didn't happen, then I think retrofitting is what's not palatable. So.
And let me say one thing to that. In recent years, there was a request to put a gas station in West Haven, and all the neighbors said
Yeah,
no.
they did not like that.
No.
Yeah.
Bill, we're going to be, sorry.
Go ahead, Alderman Berger, I'm sorry.
So I think one of the big problems we have is we do not have strict enough design controls on our gas stations. You go around the country and you go to very special places, and they don't allow the regular gas stations to look like regular gas stations. And that's too bad. If they don't want to come in and they don't want to do a design that's really great looking, then go away. I'm not worried about that. What I'm worried about is that we quit building these gas stations every single day that look like gas stations when we have opportunities to do phenomenal designs. Go around, visit Cary, go around, visit different communities. They have them all over the place. And we have a few here. Berry Farms did a much better job in their gas station down there. That even looks a lot better. So we don't need to put up the typical yellow and orange and red gas stations and the green and white gas stations with all the big neon lights. You know, and if they don't, yeah, we had a lot. But if they don't want it and they go, well, we're going to build this or we're not going to build, fine, goodbye, don't go away. Someone will come and someone will build it because there's plenty of them around. So I want to see us change our design standards radically and our design books because we need to do that.
We'd be happy to have that discussion. We have updated them in this latest zoning ordinance regarding canopy location and how the building has to be designed along the street. But we've also changed roof pitches and some of those things, but we don't have specific architectural standards that are unique only to gas stations. But we did really enhance what we would consider a retail or commercial building architectural standards with the 2019 zoning ordinance. We haven't had many gas stations submitted under that
No,
ordinance.
you don't,
at
you
this
don't,
point.
you don't.
So-
Even the one you have here on page 2 looks even better. So we have to shore those up a lot better, and we have to talk about design, and we have to talk about colors. We have to do that because this community wants that. I've heard that all day long from people, so just want to make that point.
Alderman Baggett?
I would echo Alderman Berger, and I do think we do have very high. I mean, if you go to a lot of places, our gas stations are a lot nicer than a lot of other places too. So we do have some good standards, but they can be better. And I think I'd be fine with taking it out of this but guess what? Now we're gonna have PD, and we're gonna have every gas station that comes through to us, unless it's in RC, we're gonna have to vote on it. And then guess what? There's gonna be more buttons, and that's fine. I'm happy to do that. But if we do that, let's at least have some standards with our gas stations, something that we can makes it easier to do if it's the right location. I think that's going to be key, and I agree. If we pull it out of this, it's all going to PD. That's where they're going to be suggested. We're going to have 3 meetings and a public hearing and people who still don't want it. So to your point, let's really ratchet up the requirements, and that way it makes it maybe a little bit smoother if it's in the right location, right? I mean, I think that's a fair point.
I wouldn't be hating on all our gas stations. You have to look at how long they've been there. If you look at the new gas stations, they do have a more elevated than. Okay.
An example is the one on Carruthers over by Lifetime.
Sure.
That did not need to be there like that. They could have done a fabulous design, but we don't have enough design on our books yet.
Well, we did change all the regulations for gas stations after that.
I know. Well, that and the big apartment buildings and everything, Carruthers got left in the wind over there.
Yeah. The timing.
Vice Mayor?
One question. What does this do to the property owner?
Well,
what
if
is-
you
and what is
own
his-
property in neighborhood commercial and we took the ability to build a gas station out of the zoning ordinance, then, I mean, they would be impacted if, they were gonna sell to a potential gas station developer or owner.
This doesn't affect the existing project.
Right.
Just so-
But not existing,
Yeah.
correct?
And I'll, if I will, I'll just, and Alderman Berger and Alderman Brown as well, Baggett, is the feedback that you were sharing about the design standards. When we had that session, that is exactly what they wanted to see. They wanted to see the exterior of the buildings, similar to what you gave the example in Berry Farms, that type of similar, the roof pitch, the colors, everything.
Yeah, people tell me that all the time.
Yep.
All right, we need to stop, and we'll get everything ready. Thanks.